Welcome to Jackie's Craft Table. Hi, thanks for joining me. I'm creating two cards with the same layout but using different art mediums. This is a gorgeous stamp set from Gina K Designs, and it's called Daisy Delight. I was at her store a few weeks ago. I had signed up for one of her classes, and it was a brush lettering class, which I really enjoyed. And of course, on the way out, you pass all of these beautiful stamps and inks and papers, and you have to stop and look at all of the gorgeous things. On Saturdays, sometimes she has a make and take card, and this was the stamp she was using for that. And I just fell in love with this giant daisy. I love big flower images, so I had to pick this up on my way out. For my first card, I'm inking up the stamp with some Versamark ink, and I'm stamping that onto a piece of black onyx Gina K cardstock. I stamp it a couple of times just because it is such a large image. And then I'm going to pour over some white embossing powder. I just love the look of the white embossing powder on the black cardstock. So beautiful. I'm funneling the excess powder back into the little jar. I warmed up my heat tool for about a minute before I brought it to the paper to melt this embossing powder. This helps prevent warpage of your paper. I did use my anti-static powder bag, but even so, I still got a few strays. I could have scraped them off with a penknife, but I'm going to be covering them up with some enamel dots. I'm going to start on my second card panel, and I'm using some extreme black ink to stamp this onto some Gina K Designs kraft cardstock. I really like this kraft cardstock because it's lighter in color. I would say it's pretty similar to the Desert Storm cardstock that a lot of card crafters use. I stamped this out a few times as well onto this cardstock, just to get a nice dark impression. I'm going to be coloring this with some Copic markers, and I haven't ever tried Copic markers on kraft cardstock before, but I'm going to give it a go. Because I stamped this so much, I'm going to put this aside and let it dry, and go back to my first black cardstock panel. I'm pulling out my gem tone Kuretake watercolors for this. I just love the look of these watercolors on black cardstock. They are very fun to play with. And I'm going to paint in this flower in rainbow order. And I'm starting out with pink. Rainbows in my world always have to have a little bit of pink in them. And then I'm going to move on to the red. I used a little spray bottle to squirt each of the pans of color, just to give them time to soften up. I'm trying not to use too much water on this card panel because it isn't watercolor cardstock. This panel does end up warping a teeny bit, but once it dries, it flattens out. Now, this palette didn't come with an orange, so I'm just going to create my own orange color with a little bit of red and yellow. So as I mentioned earlier, I did take a brush lettering class, and it was a beginner class. It was so much fun. Hand lettering has always been an interest of mine, and when I saw that she was offering this class, I just jumped at it. I learned a lot from this class, but it does take practice, and so every day I just spend a few minutes practicing my letters. Once I feel that my lettering is decent enough, I want to be able to write my own sentiments on my cards. Now on to my second card panel, and I just wanted to quickly show you what these Copic markers look like on the kraft cardstock as well as some white cardstock. And I want my flower to be kind of peachy tones. And this one is the R32, and it is called Peach. It looks really dull on the kraft cardstock, but you have to let it dry, and then you'll see how pretty it looks on the kraft. So these are the colors I'm going to be using. And I'm just drawing them a little bit, and they do lighten up a lot. So I'm going lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest for this card panel. And I'm going in with my peach tone just to wet the paper, and I'm covering the whole petal. Then I go in with my R22, which is my medium tone, and I don't go all the way out to the end of the petal with that. And then I go in with my R24 to put in my darkest shadows. And then I blend it out again with my mid-tone, which is the R22, and then again with my R32, my lightest tone. I'm only doing 2 petals at a time because I don't want my paper to dry. Copic markers blend better when you keep the paper wet. And it doesn't look so great when it first goes on, but when it dries, it just turns out beautiful. Later on, I do go in with a darker red, a R39, because I just wanted the shadows to be just a tad darker. I'm going to turn on some music for a minute while I finish up my coloring. Next, I'm adding some highlights with my white Prismacolor pencil. And this just adds a lot. It sure makes the image pop. I'm not worrying about a light source for this flower. I'm just adding a little bit of the white. And I also end up adding it to the center of the flower. For both of my panels, I'm going to be doing some partial die cutting. And I have a faux stitched die here, which I taped down to my panel with some micropore tape. And I put that on the bottom plate. I cover it with the top plate, but I only put that where I want the die to cut. So it won't cut anywhere there's not a top plate covering my card panel, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to fussy cut around the rest of this flower. If I had the die for this flower, I could have partially die cut that as well, but it's just pretty easy to fussy cut this out. I'm going to do the same thing for my kraft cardstock panel. Now to put these cards together, and I'm going to start with my black cardstock. I put a bit of fun foam beneath it with some score tape, and I'm adding it to this pretty white paper I got from Simon Says Stamp. I'll have all of the links listed over on my blog if you're interested. I heat embossed my happy birthday sentiment, and now I'm just going to pop that onto the front of my card with some foam tape. I'm using some tape runner just to attach the card panel onto my card base. Now for a few embellishments. I'm just using some enamel dots, some black and white. I'm just going to scatter them across the front of my card. And that completes my first card. For my second card, I'm going to stamp the happy birthday sentiment right onto the card panel. And I'm doing this very carefully because I had already put some fun foam behind it. I didn't want to pull that off, so it does have a bit of dimension to it, so I'm just being very careful to stamp this out. Now I can peel off the release paper and add that onto some tomato soup Gina K cardstock. I just love the color of this cardstock. Out of the two cards, I think this one is my favorite. And then I'm going to attach that to another white card base. I'm going to scatter on a few gumdrops. These are enamel dots from Your Next Stamp. I just love these. And this completes both of my cards. Which one do you like best? Let me know in the comments below. Please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also click on the bell if you'd like to be notified when I publish a new video. And don't forget to share this video on your favorite social media. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day.